Yeah, it was interesting working in a country where earthen building was not a tradition. So the tradition in Thailand, the traditional building style of Thailand was lightweight housing, using bamboo, using other grasses, thatch for roofing, bamboo for structure. And they would build off the ground. It's a tropical climate, and so it makes sense. You have cool, the cool breeze underneath, and so it worked really well. They also used a lot of their hardwood. 90% of the jungle in Thailand has been deforested. And so now hardwood is not only a scarce resource, and trees, of course, would prefer them being trees rather than posts in a house. It's just expensive on all fronts. And so it's about 30 years ago that the cement industry started spreading itself throughout the world, and certainly in Thailand is yet another example. And housing became the reality of housing oneself and housing one's family meant that people were going into lifetimes of debt. People were drawn or are drawn to cement housing, concrete, because of it's more permanent and takes less maintenance and care than something like bamboo, which bamboo, over time, bugs will eat it, you have to replace it, which is perfectly renewable and natural and appropriate. As villagers were looking for more permanent, long-term housing, they were using concrete and cement, and earthen building came in as a replacement for that. So building heavier, thicker-walled housing that will last longer and is designed well so that you've got it shaded, and in the tropics that means you've got a really nice, cool house. And of course, you've got to design it so that in the monsoons you've got proper drainage. But anyone who, and most villagers in Thailand know how to build, so it's common sense to design in that way. So earthen housing now in Thailand is really an alternative to the environmentally and financially costly cement housing. One thing more, in Thailand, people are very creative and they're really open-minded. So that was fascinating to work with people who were totally open to the material of earth and really excited to work with something that they could get really creative with. And so the art and the sculpture and the niches and the decorative aspect, I think, was a big turn on for a lot of people we worked with in Thailand. Yeah, there's very little fear that's built into Thai culture. So people have an innate confidence to try something they've never done before and just experiment. A lot of experimentation. So after this 10-day training that we did in Thailand at this activist training center with all these different NGOs and a really fascinating, diverse group of people, representatives of different social networks, there was a villager who had been invited to come to that first 10-day workshop. His name is Joe Jendai. Joe definitely stood out, and part of our intention, one of our founding principles in our work is that we are there as a networking instrument, if you will, and supporting local networks too. And so we were looking for who here could help carry this work forward so that we can remove ourselves from this process or become more of just support for work that continues on, that Thai people themselves take it and run with it. And so Joe was at this workshop and stood out as being the one to keep working with. And Joe had been experimenting in Thailand. He was the only one that we knew of who was working with thick-walled earthen building. In Thailand previously, the only earthen building that was happening was fairly minimal, and it was in the north, and it was mainly wattle and daub, where they were rubbing mud on bamboo slats and for seed and grain storage. Not a very common building technique, and certainly not for housing. But Joe had been to the Taos Pueblos, which is one of the North America's longest, oldest, continuously lived in structure. he was really excited to find that it was cool in the summer, in the heat of the summer. So he went back home to his village in one of the poorest regions of Thailand, started experimenting with adobe building. No books, no workshops, and for 5 years all his fellow villagers thought he was nuts as he built these adobe structures that withstood high windstorms and monsoon. And so Joe came to our workshop, and we knew that we needed to keep working with him. And because the demand was so high, and there were a lot of interest was being generated, and people were coming from Bangkok, etc. Just such a turn on that we set up a second workshop, and we built a 2-story adobe. The first workshop was cob, and the second one was adobe with Joe, and he co-instructed that.